Okay, you are live. You're live now.
Good. Okay, everybody. Well, welcome to today's session, Azure DevOps Duet, and tell about how a development team and an operations team have to bond together to start using Azure DevOps for SQL deployments. Before we get started, though, we'd like to cover a few things first. If you can donate to today's event, if you can donate to today's event, that would be fantastic. As you've probably seen, all the proceeds go to UNICEF for the COVID-19 Relief Fund. Also, a big thanks to all the sponsors who contributed towards today's charity event, or I should say this charity event. In addition, if you want to provide speaker or event feedback, you can scan these codes here. We will share these codes again at the end of this session.
So for the next 60 minutes, we'll be talking about Azure DevOps, which allows us to do the full application management lifecycle, from creating a work item all the way to its release. We'll be discussing both the cloud and on-premises version versus Azure DevOps Server, as well as its features, including source control, the boards, the pipelines, artifacts, and test plans. And at the end of this session, you'll have a basic understanding of the main features of Azure DevOps and how you can use it with SQL Server.
In this session, one of us is from the SQL development team and the other from the SQL operations team. Our manager has decided that both teams will merge into one DevOps team, so we're one big happy family.
In reality, though, this should be a really gradual process. However, we've taken it upon ourselves to do this in 60 minutes, so we've sped up this process. In addition, our manager has decided that the development team lead will be the Scrum Master and the operations team lead will be the product owner.
Now, for those of you who don't know, a product owner is responsible for translating business needs into workable backlog items for Scrum sprints, which means they have to speak to stakeholders at various levels within the business. In addition, they are ultimately responsible for prioritizing those items, even though they may get input about those priorities from various stakeholders.
A Scrum Master's role is to empower the team to do those backlog items by encouraging how they work and removing any impediments if they occur.
Now, before we go any further, let's introduce ourselves.
Yes, let's do that. So my name is Sander. I'm a SQL Server DBA from the Netherlands, and I work for Waypoint Analytical, which is a company based in the United States who do large-scale water, soil, and plant sampling. I'm a Cloud and Data Center MVP, recently renewed, which is really cool. I'm a major contributor to the DBA Tools project as well. You can follow me on Twitter. I have a blog which I try to write as much as I can, but other projects mostly coming in the way. If you have any questions after this session, please send me an email. I will try to reply as fast as I can. Just to be ahead of the questions, all the scripts that you'll be seeing today will be available on my GitHub page under the presentations with the name of this session. You can download them, distribute them, reteach them, whatever you want to do with them. They're free for you to use. And now we're going to go to Kevin's bio, which is slightly more complicated than mine.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Sander. My name is Kevin Chant. I'm a senior database architect living in the Netherlands. However, as some of you may be able to tell from the accent, I'm actually originally from the southwest of the UK. However, I live in the Netherlands due to the fact my wife is Dutch. So basically, I'm an Englishman living in the Netherlands, working for a French-based company because he met a woman in Australia. Whenever I say this out loud, I can understand why Sander thinks it's complicated. Now, I have over 23 years experience working in IT, and over that time I've worked in various sectors, including the banking, oil and health insurance industries. In fact, I've supported companies that are in the top 10 of the Fortune 500 list. Now, I've worked with all versions of SQL Server in one form or another, and I have various certifications, including both the new and the old style MCSE, and more recently, I gained the Microsoft Certified DevOps Engineer Expert certification, which is quite relevant for this session. As you can see at the bottom of the slide, I'm also on social media. I'm on Twitter at KevChant. My LinkedIn has got a user-friendly URL of Kevin-Chant. I have my own blog, and my email address is available upon request. Anyway, the first thing we'd like to discuss is whether to use Azure DevOps Cloud Service or Azure DevOps Server. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, Azure DevOps Server is the new name for TFS. However, it's now been rebranded to look and feel exactly the same as the Azure DevOps Cloud Service. Personally, I'd like to use Azure DevOps Server on premises so that we can handle its security better. Plus, it means that we get to keep this backend SQL Server databases on premises as well, so we can take advantage of all the additional reporting functionality that provides, which you can't use with Azure DevOps Cloud Service. However, the downside is that we'd have to build one or more servers with Azure DevOps Server installed for business continuity, and maybe some additional SQL servers as well. Plus, we'd have to wait for new features to be released because of the cloud first strategy. Plus, we'd have to maintain and patch all of the servers that we built on premises.
But if you use the Azure DevOps Service in the cloud instead, you won't have to worry about to patch, maintain anything, because it's already maintained by Microsoft in the background. So you don't have to take care of all that. It's easier, right? Plus, it's easier to install extensions from the marketplace.
That's true, and we can still secure it in Azure anyway. Besides, whichever one we use, we still have to consider security and compliance to keep our auditors happy. Luckily, Azure DevOps is fairly well structured and easy to manage.
So the main point we want you to take away from this section is if you want to install Azure DevOps Server, you have to patch, maintain everything. And if you use the cloud service, everything is taken care of for you. So just decide what's best for your situation and fits your company.
Yeah. So going back to what I was saying there about Azure DevOps being well structured, I'm just going to quickly flip back to the home page here. As you can see here, Azure DevOps is fairly well structured and it has its own hierarchy. At the top here, you have your service where your account has access to one or more organizations, which you can see here on the left-hand side in Azure DevOps. For instance, an organization can be your company or an independent Azure DevOps organization you've created for yourself. Now, each organization can have one or more projects, and each project can have one or more teams, which we will cover shortly. Now, if you look inside one of these projects, you will see on the left-hand side all the features that Sander mentioned at the start of this session. Plus, if you have the right permissions, you can change things at either the organization or the project level within Azure DevOps. Of course, like I said, it's depending on which permissions you get given. For example, if you go into project settings, which at least one person in your team tends to have permissions to look at, you can change various things to make your project more customized. For example, you can create your teams here for your project within Azure DevOps. And of course, if you click on one of the teams, you can add your team members. In addition to that, you can click on permissions, so you can add fine-grained permissions for each of your teams as well. So for example, here, very granular permissions you can set. Of course, it's not just about creating teams and permissions in your project settings. You can do other things as well. For example, within your own project, you can actually create service hooks to other applications. For instance, if I click on service hooks and then click on create subscription, you can see that I can actually create service hooks here into a lot of applications. If I scroll down, a couple of popular ones that people tend to use are Jenkins, because then they can connect Azure DevOps to their existing Jenkins pipelines, and also Microsoft Teams, which is very relevant for all of us because we're using Microsoft Teams today. In fact, I've used this in the past so that whenever a new pull request is raised, it will actually send a message to a specific channel within Azure DevOps, within Microsoft Teams. Trust me, it's very powerful. Now, you can see here, there's other things you can do as well. For instance, you can configure agent pools, which are something that we will discuss later on in today's session, which is basically how you can have servers to deal with the processing of your deployments for you, as well as parallel jobs, where you can configure exactly how many of those servers can be used for each specific pipeline deployment you want to do.
Now we're talking. Remember, there are other things we can configure as well. For example, we can set the boards to use Scrum, in which we will need, which you will see later on in this session. And the main point we want you to take away from this section is how Azure DevOps is structured with all the different parts, like the boards and the settings and the projects. So anyway, now we've covered the main admin stuff. Let's cover version control within the Azure repos, which is a feature from Azure DevOps.
You mean like source safe?
Well, maybe something a little bit more modern, since Azure Repos supports multiple version control systems. It supports both Git and Team Foundation version control, so TFVC. But mostly Git. Git is something that has become de facto standard nowadays.
But that will only be for your development though, right? Because it sounds like version control would be complicated for the ops guys to learn.
Well, actually, I think you will see that the ops team, if they start using version control, will start to perform better. At my current company, the ops team is starting to use more and more version control, and all the scripting, all the automation, everything is saved in version control. If it's not in version control, it doesn't exist. And they're actually performing better because other people can look at the code too and make improvements, which makes the performance better.
Well, I'm always going for performing better, so tell me more.
So, like I said, Azure DevOps supports multiple version control systems. We are going to use Git because it's a distributed version control system, which is going to be better for us in our situation.
Okay, so what about branching strategies? Because I hear they're pretty important.
Yeah, they are. So we can use various ones that we can use. For example, people may know the Git flow and the GitHub flow.
Well, what's the difference between those two? Because they sound pretty similar to me.
So the major difference between the two is that the Git flow, with the Git flow, you don't directly merge into master unless it's a hotfix. With the GitHub flow, there is no development branch, and there are only feature branches. So as soon as a feature branch is tested and approved, it will be merged into master right away. And Us devs have been using source control for many years. So if we do something like pair programming between dev and ops members, may get used to it a bit quicker.
Peer programming?
No, pair programming. This is literally where two people sit together and work on the same code. And I understand with nowadays with Corona thing that keeping your distance, that it may be a little harder to do. But research has shown it takes a bit longer to do. However, in the end, you will have more stable code and people will learn new coding practices in a faster pace.
Wouldn't that mean there's a lot of overhead involved with that practice, though?
Yeah, you will be right. And there's about a 15% overhead, but that overhead is compensated with the increase of code quality, which means less bug fixes. And we all know bug fixes take a lot more time than the actual development of the code. And of course, there are other methods you can use, like code reviews and stuff. At the end of the day, it's just experiment which method works best for your situation. You can, if code reviews work out, fine. If pair programming works out, yeah, let's see what works.
Okay, so I got a question for you then. What is to stop somebody coding their own release and pushing it straight to the master branch?
Yeah, that's going to be important, right? So in Azure DevOps, we have branching policies, which we can use. One of which, what we can do is that two people have to approve any update to master, which is going to be pretty important.
Yeah, actually, I think I've done that before, and I'll just demonstrate that for people here, because you need to have these kind of things in place, especially for your main branches to be SOX compliant. So I'll just quickly show you now what we're talking about. So if we go into Azure repos here and select branches, and we select the ellipsis at the end of the branch, we can actually select the branch policies option here. Now, there's various things you can do to make sure that you're SOX compliant, for instance, if you're dealing with financial data. One of which is to set your minimum number of reviewers to 2. So you've got the 4i principle in place. And another good practice is to automatically include reviewers, which means that when you go to submit a pull request, one or more individuals will get an email asking them to go and have a look. So from here, you can just click the add button, and as you can see, I can select Sander, so he would automatically get an email every time I submitted a pull request.
Nice. And these are the main points we want you to take away from this part, from Azure repos. So Azure DevOps supports multiple version control systems, both Git and TFVC. However, Git has become de facto standard nowadays. In addition, you can secure your updates using branching policies, as you've seen here. If you're not sure what to use, just start using Git. We all know that recently Microsoft bought GitHub, so they really put their focus on Git, which means something. Git also really hooks in nice with other tools from Microsoft, like Visual Studio and Azure Data Studio. So there's no hurdle to start using it there.
Okay, so we better discuss Azure Boards, since I'm going to be using it to organize our backlog items. Now, for those who aren't there, Azure Boards can use basic, agile, Scrum, or SIM-MMI templates for each project that you create in Azure DevOps. By the way, in Azure DevOps, templates are usually known as a process. Because we're using Scrum, we're probably going to want to use the Scrum template. For now, Sander, we can keep it as standard, but we can customize these templates if we need to. So I will just quickly go through now what you can expect from the basics in Azure Boards. So basically you have work items, which is just basically every single work object that you have at the moment in Azure DevOps will be viewed in there. And you can also view removed items in this section as well. So it can be quite useful, even if you're working with Scrum. For those of you who want to work in a Kanban or Scrumban kind of way, you can actually use the boards view instead. And you can actually add additional columns to this as well. And rather more interestingly, if you really want to, you can color code all these items. Now, because we're going to be using Scrum, we'll probably mostly focus on backlogs and sprint boards here. Backlogs is where you view all your existing backlog items to work on. And sprint boards will show you what you're working on in your current sprint, as far as backlog items are concerned, and your outstanding tasks, which is really useful to use as a view, especially for your daily stand-ups.
Okay, so how are the backlog items organized for Scrum?
That's a good question. In Scrum well, in Azure DevOps for Scrum, I should say, there's a hierarchy involved. So usually and generally at the top, you would have your epics, which would have one or more features. And then each feature would have one or more backlog items. And those backlog items can have many tasks that you work on during your sprint. Now, in some larger businesses, sometimes you have themes above the epics as well, but it's not very common practice if you're working with Scrum.
Okay. So how do you propose we use the boards? I mean, if you just have all the backlog items in the list, it's going to be pretty cluttered, right?
You mean like this? Yeah, I know. And that's why I propose that we start giving backlog items sensible tags that we can filter on. As I scroll across here, you can view them.
How will we know when an item is ready for a sprint then?
Well, you can actually set the backlog items to be approved within Azure DevOps, or alternatively, we can add a tag to each item to show that it's been refined. Once, obviously, of course, it's met all the criteria. After it's refined, we can potentially allocate it to a sprint, which we can view in the sprint board that I showed earlier. By the way, everybody, the standard criteria for a backlog item to be classed as refined in Scrum is that it's clear and small enough to be part of a sprint. However, businesses can have their own criteria for when an item is refined and ready for a sprint as well.
Okay, sounds good, but hang on a minute. So I've seen we have various filters on the backlog board, but you can't show items that don't have a certain tag. How will we know what items are left to be refined?
Oh yeah, I see what you mean there. Well, we do have a couple of options here. Either we can start moving backlog items directly into future sprints once they've been refined. Of course, that means that we have to keep remembering to move all those items to sprints every time we set that. Or we can use beautiful queries to show any backlog items that do not have the refined tag. Of course, they're not actually called beautiful queries. It's just a nickname for them that I've given. So for example, if I click on the queries section here in Azure Boards, you will see that I've already created a query earlier, and I can click on there and that will show me a backlog item which is yet to have the refined tag. I must point out here, this is a very basic demo of what you can do with these queries, and you can do a lot more powerful functionality with them. For example, you can actually run one of these queries if you're linking to multiple boards and other projects that are using a combination of Scrum and Agile. You can run a query to view both your backlog items and user stories in different projects.
Nice.
By the way, before I mention it now, Sander, a British guy living over in the Netherlands actually did put a request in at one stage to have a not filter added to here as well. But apparently there wasn't enough interest in it, so it didn't get followed through.
Wow, bummer. I wonder who that was. So now we're talking about sprints. How do you propose we align our Kanban method to the backlog items? I mean, our items only last a couple of days, right?
Well, if they only last a couple of days, they can potentially be converted to a backlog item instead to be worked on during a sprint.
Fair enough. How we're going to know what our sprint goal is, though?
Well, what we can do is actually download an extension from the marketplace, which will allow us to add it. For example, I actually installed the Sprint Go extension beforehand. So if you click on the sprint board here and then click on Go, you can see you can actually type in your sprint goal here. So it's very visible for everybody that views the sprint board.
Nice. So I'm guessing we're still going to use our other applications to manage the boards in the meantime until we get a good look at this.
Well, you can still use our application to manage your boards for a while, ways you get used to Azure DevOps if you really want to. However, personally, I recommend ripping the Band-Aid off and doing the migration as soon as possible, though, to take advantage of all the integration you get in Azure DevOps. By the way, did I mention all the analytics and preview features we can potentially use with Azure Boards?
Calm down, Kevin. We only have 60 minutes. We'll never make it.
Good point. People just have to watch something elsewhere to see it being used more within Azure Boards. Anyway, the main point to take away from this section is that Azure Boards is a very powerful way to manage Scrum or Agile work visually, especially if you're a product owner.
Okay, so let's talk about Azure Pipelines. Is this the point where we'll actually build and deploy our deliverables?
Okay, so how would this work with SQL Server?
So we could look to deploy using state-based or migration-based deployments.
Well, what's the main difference between those two?
So the main difference between state-based and migration-based is that with state-based, you deploy the entire thing and check for changes. Whereas migration-based will script out all the changes since the last deployment and deploy them incrementally. So migration-based can be good. It depends on the scenario. But if there is a problem, you have to deploy everything in sequence again. With state-based, you just deploy the current state of your project. It's fairly easy to build a pipeline for SQL Server, as I will be demonstrating right now. So I'm going to share my desktop. Yes, share. Which one is it? Screen two. Can you see my screen, Kevin? The Powershell screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I am one of those lazy guys that if I have to do things twice, I will script it out. So what I did was, because I had to do like 25 to 30 databases to get them into some kind of SSDT solution, I used the PS module development PowerShell module, which enables you to create templates for basically everything from simple files to entire directories. So I could do the same thing for my projects with my SSDT solutions. And This is the entire script where it will download, where this script will download my template from my GitHub page. It will extract it, install it, and then use it to create a solution. And the most important part is this little line. This is actually the only thing that you need if you already have the template to generate a new SSDT solution. So if I run that little script, 0, it will start momentarily. Come on. Yeah, there we go. So it's going to download it, and it's going to extract it, and then install it and create the solution. And we're already done. This is the solution generated just with this script. And if I open that, of course, Visual Studio opens in another window, so take a couple seconds. Yes, there we go. So, and I apologize for the resolution, but there are two projects within my within my solution, which is the data and the tests. And the data will contain all the objects, all the store procedures, all the tables, all the objects needed for the database itself. And the tests will only contain the unit tests and integration tests for my database. And this way I can really generate a lot of these projects fast, because I can do imports from here. As if I run my second script, so I'm going to simple little database, which does create about 10 tables and like 50 store procedures. So, there we go. So if I go there it is, and I change this to object because we don't have that many objects. I'm going to import my database. Done. So now I have my store procedures and my tables, and you can do the same thing for your databases to get you started with your putting everything in your state-based solutions that way. One upside to this is, which I want to show you, is that little directory that we created also has a build, and it has a Azure pipeline YAML file. And this YAML file will automatically be detected if you say create new pipeline from Azure DevOps, and you select your Azure repos from that point on, or your repo that you're going to use. It will find this file, and you just have to select it and say edit. And this YAML file has all the little things for Visual Studio, the build, and also tests for SQL Server on 2017, and same thing for 2019. So this is all generated. This is all done for you. You don't have to build it yourself. Does that explain a lot about the pipelines, Kevin?
Yeah, apart from how it looks in Azure DevOps.
Oh, we can demonstrate it later on. We can show that.
Okay. Well, in that case, what about unit tests? Because I know we can do that for other programming languages within Azure DevOps.
Yeah, we can. So I'm a big fan of unit tests, and especially for databases, which is really underrated. And I like to use the T-SQL-T framework. T-SQL-T is an open source unit testing framework. which you have to install with your database, and you can use you can build really sophisticated unit tests with that. One upside though, because I'm really lazy when it comes to repetitive tasks, I created a PowerShell module called the PowerShell TCQT test generator, the TCQT test generator. And that actually takes your current state of your database and then creates the all the basic unit tests, like is my table there, is my store procedure there, does my function have the correct parameters for the correct data types, the same for the tables, etc. And if I run that, so if I declare a script, it will pull that database, see, okay, I've got my database, let's do some object existence tests, and it's going to generate it and push that directly into the directory of my SSDT solution, because I selected it that way. And this takes like a minute or two. It generates over 120 tests. And I want to emphasize, you only do this once, because as soon as if you do this every time, your tests are always going to be successful, because it takes the current state of your database. There we go. View columns, we don't have any views. So if we then go back to the project and say add, and go to test basic, we have all our basic unit tests and stuff we can that it tests is my collation correct? I'm going to increase this size a bit. So is my collation correct? Is my store procedure there? Does my table have the correct columns, etc., etc., etc.? It all generates it for you. So you have a basic unit testing already there for you, and you can just go ahead and start your pipeline. So another good thing we can do is we can link our pipeline activities to our work items. In fact, one of the advantages of Azure DevOps is that it's so integrated, we can link our repo updates to work items as well, plus the test cases.
Ah. Okay, well, I assume we can use either GUI tasks or YAML for our pipelines. Which one should we use? Because I've not seen any of the pipelines yet either.
Well, the GUI is good for exploring the pipelines, but YAML is easier to do. So actually, it's not that difficult. As soon as you have your Azure Pipeline YAML file already there, it's also going to be in source code in your repo. You can just go to the marketplace and add other sections, and it will transform that little part that you want to insert into YAML and insert it where at that point the cursor is in your YAML file for the pipeline. Of course, we can use SQL deployments. You can call PowerShell for your YAML to handle deployments if you're dealing with a large number of servers.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yes, we can. So what we'll have to do is to let PowerShell output the XML format in a JUnit format to get the test results, and then allow Azure DevOps to use that XML in a task which publishes the test results to view the results visually. Of course, we can put other mechanisms in place for that as well.
Awesome. So I'm just going to take control of the screen again a minute, if that's okay.
Yeah, yes.
because I had another question as well, because I was actually looking at the is it sharing the right screen now? Nope.
No, your video is sharing, but not your screen. Yeah, now it's sharing your screen.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I was just looking at the pipeline that you just created from running your PowerShell code there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kind of noticed that we see all the tasks that you can add as well, additionally to your pipeline on the right-hand side here. Are we limited to only those?
No. There are a bunch of others you can import from the marketplace. Of course, we are an enterprise company, and we may have to request the admin to install those for us.
I didn't realize that was a thing.
Oh yeah, but it does mean we can get help with those security compliance issues you were talking about earlier with the repositories.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen we can use Microsoft hosted agents even within our own network on premises, which is service that Microsoft hosted in Azure to do a lot of the processing of the build and release tasks, basically your deployment pipelines, like building the various artifacts which Sander showed just now and deploying them. However, it looks like because of our infrastructure, we'd have a lot of issues internally because we're going to have to raise a lot of firewall requests just to have these hosted agents connected into our servers to do all these deployments. So maybe we're better off building our own agents internally.
Yeah, maybe. But remember, a lot of us are developers and we don't want to build our own servers. Plus, we had to figure out exactly what software we need to get installed on the agent to maintain them, right? Oh, that's cool.
So for the benefit of everybody else that's seeing it here, Microsoft actually provides a guide on how to create images with the various agents in GitHub. I understand that the title may be a bit confusing for some of you. It used to be just a repo to deploy Azure DevOps agents. However, because like Sander talked about earlier, Microsoft are now putting a lot of development into GitHub as well. They are using the same image for Azure DevOps agents and agents that you can use with GitHub Actions now. And in fact, if I right click on one of these as well, you can actually view all the software that will be installed if you follow one of these guides.
Cool. So, well, if we're going to do that, we might just run the agent through the command line instead of a service, right?
How come?
Everybody knows that running something through the command line gives you more results. I do that all the time.
Well, okay, I actually did test it earlier. So let's see the results in the next slide.
Oh,
Are you ready?
yeah. And behold, nothing. Only one line.
Yeah, so you don't actually get any verbose results.
Damn it. So, up to the next part. Let's go to test plans.
Pretty rush for you there.
Yeah. So, of course, we can do test plans once we've done the initial build and release before we release elsewhere.
Don't they all have to be automated though? Because that'll take a lot of effort for some items.
Not necessarily. Your test plans can have manual steps as well. However, our trial period has expired, and so you would have to imagine it from this part right now.
Yeah, so basically, if you want to use test plans all the time in Azure DevOps, you need a slightly different license called Basic Plus Test Plans. You can, if you have your own organization, sign up for a 30-day trial. Unfortunately, mine and Sandra's trial has expired and we haven't renewed with the new license. So yeah, if I will quickly show you where they are here. So for test plans, you will just have to imagine that you can create your test plans here. But like Sandra was just saying, you can have a lot of manual steps with this as well.
Yeah. So we better discuss artifacts, which is where we share various things like NuGet packages with other people. For example, you can create a NuGet package and share it on the Azure artifacts for others to use.
Yeah, but it's a bit strange because when I first went to do it earlier, I wasn't able to do it with the organization I created with my free for free, my Visual Studio subscription.
That is, and I know what it is. It's probably because you have set them up in your Visual Studio subscription benefits page.
Ah, okay. On that note, by the way, just a reminder for all of you out there that if you have a Visual Studio subscription, you are able to have your own Azure DevOps organization to test things on. And you can also do it as well outside of having a Visual Studio subscription, but you get a few extra bits I'm led to believe if you have your Visual Studio subscription in place.
Okay, but just in case you want to test things without the fear of breaking anything in your company's Azure DevOps organization, don't test those kind of things in the official things, in the official parts. Please don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there are other features I'm looking forward to the team using as well in Azure DevOps. I mean, for instance, the various dashboards that we can configure. So if you're doing things like a daily stand-up, if you're a Scrum Master, these dashboards, well, for yourself, Sandra, this dashboard is going to be really good because you can use the Sprint Go extension we mentioned earlier to put a widget in place. So you can remind everybody at the start of the daily stand-up what the sprint goal is. You can also see some stats to do with your releases, your sprint burn down, depending on, so you can see the sprint burn down go down every day when your team's closed off various tasks or they've reduced the hours on them, etc., etc.
Don't forget the wiki. Also have that.
That's true. You can use the wiki as well to put in information for your team to use on how to do various things, standards you've agreed on, etc. Also, there is the new analytics views feature, but it's new. I say it's new, but it's currently in preview. And the last time I looked, you actually have to in preview for your own organization. And basically all the metrics that you see here from Azure Boards, you can actually use output to a Power BI dashboards. Trust me, I've actually used this myself to replicate a sprint review report, and it is really good. I find it quite useful, so it's worth experimenting with.
So where shall we begin?
Well, I suggest that we start by getting both of our teams together and explain to them what we're trying to achieve to get them to buy into it and take it from there.
Okay, so that's the end of our session. That's the end of our session. Are there any questions?
Hi Kevin, hi Sandra. Yeah, this is Pooja Rajpal, and I cannot see any questions right now. I think it's really a great session. Nobody has any doubts, and we really learned a lot. So,
So these are the feedback codes we promised to show again. If there are no questions, all that's left to say is hope you enjoyed this session and hope you enjoy the rest of this event.
Yeah, and thank you very much for having us again.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.